Tell me about your meditation practice. How long have you been meditating?
Well, formally, I would say I have meditated.
Can I just get you to speak up?
I would say in the last 25 years, it practically has never been one day in which I did not do some sitting meditation. Sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes retreats, sometimes very little, but more or less 25 years.
And what do you think the benefits of meditating in solitude are?
The benefits of meditating in solitude are great, but to do that, you need to be very established in your practice already. Otherwise, it's not easy. It's better to have the encouragement and help of a group or a monastery or teacher. But then there is stages in the path always in life, as in life. So there is a moment where it's much more convenient to be in solitude.
What are the difficulties you encounter in solitude?
Well, when you are
speak up a little bit louder.
When you are established in a practice of meditation, that is not a difficult at all. The difficulties usually are more on the physical level. You know, you have to find a place where food is easily available or provided, more or less not being molested by people in seclusion, not too rough the weather. So mostly those are the difficulties, which they are very simple, but still they might take too much energy and time. But in the practice itself, no, there is no difficulty at all, because as I said, you are already very established in that practice. So that practice is more natural than being out of the practice. You know, it's like breathing. It becomes like that once you are established on it.
What are some of the teachings and techniques that you've studied throughout your life? You seem to have studied a diversity.
I have studied many different traditions, Hindu, even Sufi, even Christian, and Buddhist in different traditions of Buddhism. You want me to describe some of the experiences or the techniques, or
just give an overview of what different traditions that you've studied and why you've studied in so many different schools?
Well, again, the reason why I did it is hard to tell, because there are so many reasons. But it just happens that I just went all my life the way I still do, kind of playing by ear. So one thing led me to another, and it just went on and keeps on going. Now, in the kind of practices that I have done before, it's like mantra, meditations, and also a little bit of, you can say, devotional practices like bhakti yoga, where you have an object of devotion like a god or goddess, and you do some kind of prayers. I don't do any of those things anymore since very long time ago. I do just meditation. Basically is going deep into the wisdom of no self or emptiness. And by doing that is basically getting free of all indoctrinations we have received since we were born, all concepts that we have formed, and break away all fantasies, all desires, and get into a space that is absolutely impossible to describe, because it's precisely not within the intellectual mind, which is the creator of the language. So this is beyond the mind and beyond the language. But it is a space that is full of energy, and when you come out of that space, it keeps permeating all experiences, and especially it gives all these wonderful qualities that we read about, such as joy, calm, contentment, and the most important, peace of mind.
Where did you learn this type of meditation technique?
This practice basically is a practice that you can freely choose what kind of practice you do when you go to forest monasteries in Thailand.
Hold on one second. There's so much ambient noise. Okay, yeah, let's just talk about where you learned your meditation technique and how it developed.
Yeah. Well, what happened is that over the years, in the different places where I have been, training centers, monasteries, I came across books and teachings and read about Buddhism, about practices. But it was funny, something happened to me, which happens to many people, especially in the Mahayana tradition or Hindu, that I never read directly the original scriptures of the Pali Canon. I was in Japan in a monastery for a few years, in different monasteries, and then I went to Thailand. And in a forest monastery, for the first time I come across to the suttas. I open the book and I read all the descriptions of different states of consciousness and the very scientific way that in the Theravada tradition the Buddha has to explain all the workings of the mind and the evolution of the mind and the expansion of the mind and the transcendence of the mind and all the experiences you go through. And I had already experienced a lot of those things before without reading about them during my Zen practices or Hindu practices even. So I was absolutely delighted and surprised to listen to the Buddha, who was telling about things that I am experiencing now, 2,500 years after. So that made me very, very interested in the original scriptures, and that's how I really came to the practices that I do now, just by reading those instructions directly from the Buddha, without really from teachers. Now, of course, many teachers teach those things, but I would say I learned it, these specific techniques that I use now, directly from the scriptures.
And what are those techniques? Exactly?
Well, for example, there is in quite a few sutras, because there is 5 big collections. In quite a few of them, in different way, in different contexts, the Buddha talks about the stories and how he teaches. One of them, very well known, is one time the Buddha goes to his alms round in the village with his bowl, and behind him his son Rahul is walking, and then Rahul starts thinking how beautiful his father's physical body and movements were, and he was thinking, maybe when I grow up a little older I will be also the same. And the Buddha read his mind. He stops, he turns around, and he tells very simple but extremely profound things to Rahul. He says, well, this physical body as well as this mind, in a few words, are whether it's subtle, beautiful, ugly, whatever, they are impermanent. They are not self, it's not you. And then at the end of this kind of discourse that he gave him, he said, Rahul, whatever sensations, whatever perceptions, whatever thoughts, whatever physicality, anything that appears to your senses, always consider them this feeling, this perception, this idea, this thought is not mine. This is not me. This is not myself. And this is my practice. And it looks very, very simple, and it is. But of course, like all these practices, need practice. Need a lot of practice, and also certain kind of intelligence to deepen into this. But it's basically an incredibly liberating kind of practice, liberating from concepts, from possessiveness, from greed of any kind, from goal-oriented life, as we usually have, from living in the future, always thinking, hopes and fears. All these are destroyed by this deepening of this practice.
The practice itself has no goal?
The practice itself leads someplace, obviously, but it's not exactly, I wouldn't call it a goal, because the practice itself is the goal in a way. So this is, the end of this practice is like the end of all the Oriental practices. Basically, the aim is to get liberation from samsara. So this is, you could call the goal of the practice, or the end of it.
What does liberation mean to you?
Liberation, what it means to me is be free from all the impurities, all defiles of the mind, which basically, in a very simple terms, we can say free from everything that is greed, hatred or aversion, and ignorance. Ignorance means all the concepts that we have in our mind, because in a deep way, everything that we think, no matter what, is a kind of ignorance, because thought itself is dualistic. So we can never think or say what the truth is. So liberation from concepts, from thinking, from all these defilements, that is what I call liberation. And what is left after we are free from that, as I said earlier, is not describable.
What was it that attracted you initially to pursue this kind of lifestyle?
Well, it's a long story. Even in this lifetime, since I was a child, I just was absolutely struck, especially when I became an adolescent, by the extreme corruption that I saw all around me in society. Pollution, wars, lies, all the way the adults behave, just doing a show, and the hypocrisy everywhere. So probably that kind of thing was very strong in my case, and made me, I remember sitting when I was probably 10, 12 years old in my father's house in the garden, beautiful big garden, big huge house, and I was thinking, I don't know what I want when I grow up, when I am older, but I do know what I don't want. I don't want this. This definitely not, because I was very conscious since very early age that wealth and money definitely is very, very far from what we would call peace or happiness.
Well, how old were you initially when you actually started a committed, dedicated
what happened?
study?
You want me to tell you what happened? What happened? This powerful experience I had that transformed my life.
Sure. Please do.
I was already, as I said, I was already sick and tired of all the hypocrisy, all the world, and I was staying in Los Angeles, California, in Venice, California, and something happened there. Some friends of mine joined a group of fanatical people that they used to be called Jesus freaks. Somehow, I don't want to give the story very long, but I went to their little church and I thought they were really mad. But at midnight, I went to the cellar with 5 friends, 2 American women and 2 Mexican men and myself. And they started to pray in language, and I had a very powerful experience that lasted about 1 week. During 1 week, I was not eating, not cold, and having all kinds of continuous experiences out of the body, etc., etc., and the whole universe was transformed from being hell into being the most extraordinary place that I could imagine. That was my first powerful mystical experience when I felt I was newborn. To describe each of these experiences during this week will take weeks and weeks, because every minute was an intense experience of so many different kinds.
What was it that initiated the experience?
I think, looking back...
If you sit down here, there's
here?
some light. Yeah,
Right here?
this light is coming.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah, much better.
Then after the years, I had a second experience. After that experience passed away, of course, it's all this kind of path, which is very, very painful at the beginning, because the experience goes and then you don't know how it came. And all these kind of things is the black night of the soul, as St. John of the Cross calls it. And anyways, after that, I started to have other experiences. I came into yoga, into meditation, and I started to understand why these experiences come about and how to get them, which I didn't know before. So it's a long process, and I am talking about when that experience happened to me, that very first experience. I was about 23 years old, so that means quite a long time, almost 40 years. So it's a lots of water has gone under the bridge, since then. But when I look back into that experience, I think one of the very important facts that caused the experience was precisely that absolutely in my mind, how I was totally repulsed, disgusted with the world in general. I even had thought or considered suicide. I had no way out. So basically that kind of desperate situation and no attraction for worldly power or money and things at all, I think those factors influence very much for that experience, initial experience to happen.
And as a result, in the practices that you developed and things that you learned, what have been the fruits of those practices over the greater part of your lifetime of serious study and dedication. What?
You mean the fruits of those practices in the years that I have done it after that? What is the fruit of that practice?
Yeah, of everything
The result?
you've learned. Yeah.
Well, the fruit as it is now is basically one of the things that I always wished was to be totally established in sitting meditation, and I am, because that is a practice that is more natural for me than breathing, and easy. I don't struggle. The moment I sit in the correct posture, that same instant, I am in a totally different space, which is, I would say, very calm space where time disappears, friction disappears, and then it just goes deeper and deeper. Well, that is as an experience, but the fruits themselves is not only the experiences, it's really basically I would say the detachment from all worldly desires or goals. I have no attraction for anything of what usually people call the good things of life, such as money, pleasures, having fun. And especially lately, I was a very sexual person, very strong sexual drive. I lived with women, I had harems sometimes.
You had what?
I lived with many women.
And you had
a
what?
few times.
You had what sometimes?
It's like a harem, you know.
You had a harem.
Well, I lived a few times with 10 women, things like that, or 6 or whatever. So I have done many things in my life. But anyways, I don't have absolutely the slightest desire or missing anything of my past, of my youth, or nothing at all. When I see young people that I am not anymore young, I don't envy them at all, because in our culture, in our Western culture, usually there is this idolatry of youth and beauty and health and wealth and these things. These are extremely superficial for me. Not only superficial, they are even painful. And because the dimensions into which you go through these practices, the different realities are not possible to compare to anything that this worldly existence can give you, and that already is available to me.
But are you happy?
Yes, happy. To be happy sounds very superficial, you know, but still, yeah, I would say yes, I am very happy. I am absolutely content and extremely grateful and happy that I found Dharma and that I practice it, and that I see my way unfolding and growing and getting deeper and deeper, and that gives me, that in itself is experiences which are much more than happiness and much more than just pleasure. As I say, they are undescribable. So there is nothing that I value in life besides that.